The evening shift at Poppy's Cafe had always been a serene escape for Jada. At 28 years old, she found comfort in the cafe's unchanging rhythm. Nestled in a quiet corner of town, Poppy's was the kind of place where life slowed down, where the past seemed to linger in the air like the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Its charm was understated, with checkered tablecloths and warm yellow lights casting a soft glow over the small, inviting space. The regular patrons, mostly retired locals, treated the cafe as a second home. They came not just for the coffee or the pie, but for the camaraderie, a place to share stories, laugh over memories, and recall the good old days. For Jada, these evenings were predictable and soothing. She knew the patrons by name, their orders by heart, and their quirks like the back of her hand. Frank always sat at the corner table, grumbling about politics before softening with a joke about the weather. Evelyn, a retired schoolteacher, never missed a chance to show off pictures of her grandchildren. It was a routine that felt timeless, like a well-worn song she never tired of humming. But tonight, something shifted. The bell above the door, a familiar sound marking arrivals and departures, rang out into the stillness of the nearly empty cafe. Jada glanced up from wiping down the counter, expecting to see one of the regulars. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. A man stepped inside, dressed casually in a black jacket and jeans, yet carrying an unmistakable air of presence. She recognized him instantly. Elon Musk. The Elon Musk. For a moment, her brain refused to process the sight. What was he doing here, in this small, unassuming diner that barely made a blip on the town's map? He looked slightly tired, as though the weight of the world rested on his shoulders, but his confidence was palpable. Jada froze. Her heart raced as 1,000 thoughts flooded her mind. She had seen him countless times on TV and social media. To her, he was a symbol of innovation, a larger-than-life figure pushing humanity toward the future. And now here he was, standing a mere few feet away from her, looking as if he belonged nowhere else but here. The regulars, too, noticed. Heads turned, conversations stalled, and whispers erupted. Some leaned in close to their companions, casting curious glances at the man who had become a household name. Jada could feel their collective energy shift from relaxed to charged, their disbelief mirroring her own. Still, she reminded herself that he was just another customer, albeit an extraordinary one, and approached his table with a calmness she didn't entirely feel. "Hi there," she said, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "What can I get for you tonight?" Elon looked up, his expression thoughtful, as if he'd been lost in his own world. "Just a coffee, please. Black, and maybe a slice of whatever pie you have." "Coming right up," Jada replied, flashing her practiced warm smile. She turned and walked back to the counter, acutely aware of the stares following her every move. The murmurs from the other tables grew louder, filled with questions and speculation. Why was he here? Was he lost? Jada kept her focus on the task at hand, pouring the coffee and slicing a piece of the cafe's signature apple pie. As she set the items on a tray, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder at him. He sat by the window, his gaze fixed on something outside, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his coffee cup. He seemed preoccupied, as though a storm of thoughts swirled behind his calm exterior. Jada took a deep breath, steadied herself, and walked back to his table. "Here you go," she said, placing the coffee and pie in front of him. "Thank you," he said simply, his eyes briefly meeting hers before returning to the view outside. Jada stepped back, giving him space, but her curiosity lingered. What brought him here, to this tiny corner of the world? The regulars, however, were less subtle. The whispering grew louder, and a few patrons openly stared. She noticed Frank, the gruff but lovable older man, watching Elon with a sharp, assessing look. It wasn't long before he stood up, his chair scraping against the floor as he made his way toward Elon's table. "Excuse me," Frank said, his voice cutting through the low hum of the cafe. "Aren't you the guy who used to support OpenAI? Helped set it up, didn't you?" Elon looked up, pausing mid-sip. "Yes," he said calmly. "I was involved in the early days." Frank crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "So why'd you leave then? And now, from what I hear, you're making your own AI thing. Isn't that a bit contradictory?" The room went quiet. All eyes were on the two men, the air thick with anticipation. Jada felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. She had seen Frank challenge people before, but this was different. Elon Musk wasn't just another patron. He was a global figure, someone whose every word and action were scrutinized by millions. Elon sighed, setting his coffee cup down. "I have concerns about the direction OpenAI is heading," he said, his tone measured. "I believe AI should be aligned with truth and not biased by hidden motives. That's why I started XAI. I wanted to build something transparent, something focused on facts." Frank scoffed, his skepticism unwavering. "Sure, you're just looking out for yourself. What? You didn't get the control you wanted, so now you're making your own AI? More money, more power. Isn't that it?" A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the cafe. Jada noticed the slight tension in Elon's posture, though his expression remained composed. He was no stranger to criticism, she realized. But something about the intimate setting of the cafe seemed to make this moment feel raw, almost personal. Jada's heart ached as she listened. She admired Elon for his ambition, his willingness to take risks, and his drive to change the world. To see him accused so openly, in a space that usually felt like home to her, felt wrong. The whispers, the judgmental glances, the hostility, it all felt misplaced. Without thinking, Jada stepped forward. Her voice was steady, though her nerves were anything but. "Look," she began, glancing around at the regulars who were now watching her intently. "I know not everyone agrees with what he's doing, but you can't just dismiss him as selfish." The room fell silent. Jada's heart pounded, but she pressed on. This is a guy who's not only invested in space and tech, but also has a foundation that helps hospitals and sick kids. I've read about it. And when it comes to AI, well, technology is going to move forward whether we like it or not. The fact that he's trying to make something safer, more transparent, that's worth something, don't you think? Her words seemed to catch Elon's attention. He looked at her, a glimmer of surprise and perhaps even appreciation in his eyes. The regulars, however, were less convinced. Some exchanged uneasy glances, while others looked away, their skepticism still evident. Frank, uncharacteristically quiet, finally muttered, "Maybe, but it still doesn't sit right with me." He returned to his seat, his gruff demeanor intact, but his usual bluster slightly subdued. Jada felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. She turned to see her boss, Mr. Smith, standing by the counter, his expression unreadable. He stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "Jada," he said, his voice calm but firm. "A word, please." Jada stood at the counter, her mind reeling long after Elon Musk had left. The weight of the past evening had been lifted, but it was quickly replaced by a strange mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism. She couldn't help but replay his words in her head. A position at his foundation? The idea seemed almost absurd. She was just a waitress in a small-town cafe. What could she possibly offer to someone like him? And yet, there was a sincerity in his tone that she couldn't ignore, a genuine belief in her that felt both overwhelming and empowering. The rest of the day was a blur. The regulars who had been so vocal the night before now seemed subdued. A few of them avoided her altogether, while others offered polite but hollow pleasantries. Jada moved through her tasks with mechanical precision, her thoughts elsewhere. She wanted to tell someone what had just happened, to share the incredible offer she'd received, but a part of her hesitated. What if it didn't work out? What if it had just been a kind gesture, something Elon would forget as soon as he stepped back into his whirlwind life? When her shift ended, she walked home under a sky painted with streaks of orange and pink. The cool evening air was crisp against her skin, and for the first time in what felt like days, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. She had a decision to make, and though fear lingered at the edges of her mind, a spark of excitement began to take hold. Could this be the chance she'd been waiting for? A way out of the monotonous cycle of her life? The next morning, Jada woke up feeling strangely energized. She had barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities, but the exhaustion that should have weighed her down was absent. She stepped into Poppy's cafe for what she thought would be her final full shift, her head held high despite the tension in the air. She resolved to finish her time here with grace, even if the memories of this place, once her sanctuary, had been tarnished by the events of the past 2 days. The lunch rush came and went without much fanfare. Jada worked quietly, avoiding unnecessary conversations and focusing on the task at hand. As the afternoon wore on, the cafe settled into its usual calm, and she began to feel the weight of her impending departure. Her connection to this place, to the people who frequented it, ran deeper than she had realized. Despite everything, she would miss the familiarity, the predictable rhythm of it all. And then, just as the lull of the afternoon settled in, the bell above the door chimed. Jada glanced up instinctively, and her breath caught in her throat. Elon Musk had returned. He walked in with the same casual confidence as before, his presence once again commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The regulars exchanged wide-eyed glances, their whispers starting almost immediately. Jada froze for a moment, unsure of what to do, but then she composed herself and approached his table. This time there was no hesitation in her step. "Welcome back," she said, her voice steady. "Can I get you the usual?" Elon smiled, a faint but warm expression. "Yes, please." She nodded and retreated to the counter to prepare his order. The murmurs from the regulars grew louder, filled with curiosity and speculation. Why had he come back? Was it to see her? Jada tried to ignore the questions swirling around her as she placed a fresh slice of apple pie on a plate and poured a cup of coffee. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried the tray back to his table, but she kept her expression calm. "Here you go," she said, setting the items down in front of him. "Thank you," Elon replied, his tone polite but distracted. He seemed lost in thought, his gaze occasionally drifting out the window. Jada lingered for a moment, unsure if she should say something more. She wanted to ask him about the offer he had made, to understand what he saw in her that made him think she could be a part of his world. But before she could gather the courage, he looked up and caught her eye. "Sit down for a moment," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Jada hesitated, glancing around the cafe. The regulars were watching intently, their curiosity palpable, but she pushed aside her apprehension and slid into the chair. "I've been thinking about what you said," Elon began, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "About fairness, about how people judge without knowing the full story. You're right, it happens all the time. But what struck me most was the way you stood up for what you believed in, even when it wasn't easy." Jada shifted in her seat, unsure how to respond. I don't like seeing people treated unfairly," she said finally. "It doesn't matter who they are. Everyone deserves a chance to explain their side." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "That kind of integrity is rare. It's what makes you special, Jada, and it's why I think you'd be a valuable addition to my team." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jada felt a surge of emotion, pride, disbelief, and a touch of fear. "But I'm just a waitress," she said softly. "I don't know anything about the kind of work you do." Elon smiled, a genuine and reassuring expression. "You'd be surprised how much of what you already know can apply. It's not about technical skills. Those can be taught. It's about heart, about caring enough to make a difference. And you've already shown that you have what it takes." Jada's mind raced. Could she really do this? Take a leap into the unknown and trust that she could rise to the challenge? She thought about the monotony of her life at the cafe, the way she had always longed for something more, but had never dared to pursue it. Maybe this was her chance, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to step out of her comfort zone and into something extraordinary. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice trembling with both excitement and nerves. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to try." Elon's smile widened. "That's all I needed to hear. My team will be in touch soon to sort out the details." As he stood to leave, Jada felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in days, the weight on her shoulders lifted, replaced by a sense of possibility. She watched as he walked out of the cafe, the bell chiming softly behind him, and felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. The regulars were silent, their expressions a mix of surprise and uncertainty. Jada returned to the counter, her heart racing but her mind clear. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was excited to find out. Jada's story is a testament to the unexpected power of standing up for what you believe in. Her defense of Elon Musk wasn't about his fame or fortune, but about a core principle: fairness. In a moment where she could have stayed silent, she chose to act, even at the risk of alienating the regulars she'd known for years and losing her job. What's striking is how her small act of courage rippled into something far greater. Jada didn't expect recognition or reward. She simply stood up for what she felt was right. Yet that integrity caught the attention of someone who could change her life. Elon, often reduced to a polarizing public figure, recognized her sincerity and offered her an opportunity to step into a new future. Her story reminds us that small moments of bravery can lead to unexpected transformations. It challenges us to consider how often we hold back out of fear and how much potential lies in taking a stand. Jada's journey is proof that integrity and compassion can bridge divides and create opportunities where none seem possible.